Welcome to Studio Green Bean, where inspiration grows. I'm Anna, and today I will be showing you how to make your very own jewelry findings. Findings are functional pieces in jewelry making. Jump rings to connect pieces to each other, ear wires so your earrings become wearable, eye pins and head pins to hold and hang your beads, and hook clasps to attach to necklaces and bracelets. You can always buy these findings pre-made, but I find it is cheaper and more versatile to make your own. Let's get started.
To make jump rings, you will need wire. I use 20 gauge wire, a jump ring maker or a round implement for making jump rings, and finally something to cut your wire with, such as these wire cutters. To begin, take your wire and your jump ring maker. My jump ring maker has a hole in which to secure the wire. If yours doesn't have a securing point, you can just hold it with your finger. Once the wire is secure, all you have to do is just wrap the wire around the mandrel of the jump ring maker. The most important part in wrapping the wire in this step is to make the coils as close together and as tight to each other as possible. This will ensure that you have really good jump rings and you are not wasting any wire. After you are done winding your wire, which for me is either until I run out of wire from my spool or I'll reach the end of the mandrel, take your wire cutters and snip off the wire almost to the roll of the wires on your mandrel. After this, you can unsecure your wire from the other end and slide off the roll of rings from your mandrel. Your rings are now ready to use. In order to use one for your piece, locate the end of the jump ring on the roll and using your wire cutters, snip off one or two rings inwards from the end. And that's all there is to it. Your jump rings are now ready to use in your jewelry designs. In order to make ear wires, you will need 20 gauge wire, some wire cutters to cut that wire, round nose pliers to make loops, and nylon jaw pliers in order to handle your material gently. A file to file the ends of the wire so you don't end up stabbing yourself, a round implement such as a pencil or a pen, and finally a ruler. Let's go ahead and jump right into it. To start, take your wire and measure out two lengths of 2.5 inches each. It is not necessary for it to be an exact 2.5 inches, but it is best that the two lengths of wire are of semi-equal length, since we want our two ear wires to be comparable in size and length. It'll make things much easier to construct them. This is all the wire that we need, so go ahead and put your spool away. Now take out your round nose pliers and, holding the two wire lengths together, make a loop that is somewhere down the middle of the wire of the round nose pliers in size. This is a medium length loop. You can experiment this with later, making larger or smaller loops as your designs call for it. Both your wires should have loops of approximately the same size. Now take your round implement and, holding the wire such as I am showing in this video with your thumb, start gently bending the two wires together simultaneously around the pencil until the wire almost meets the loops that you made. Next, slide your finger down the length of the wire and gently bend it at a 45-degree angle. You should now have something that looks like this. If the bottom part is too long for your taste, go ahead and snip off the extra portion of the wire. Next, since your earrings are probably bent kind of weirdly from all the bending that you did to them, go ahead and smooth them out with the nylon jaw pliers. The nylon jaw pliers are nice for this job because the nylon coating on the ends will not mar your material or leave any unwanted marks or texture. The final step is to file the ends of your ear wires so that when you put them into your ears, the metal is smooth and is not stabbing. I am sort of lazy about my filing, so I will file until the metal meets the scratch test. Scratch it against my finger, and if it feels smooth and not particularly jagged, I just leave it like that. This is a personal preference, and you may do more or less filing as you please. Your ear wires are now ready for action. In order to make our head pins and eye pins, first of all we are going to use a beading mat so that all our small pieces and beads are not running around. We're also going to need wire cutters to cut our wire and round nose pliers to make loops in our wire. Of course, we are also going to use our favorite 20 gauge wire for this project. And I will use a couple of beads that I will use to put on to our head and eye pins. Here is the difference between head pins and eye pins. Head pins have a sort of nail head on the bottom, while eye pins have a loop. This difference is useful for when you don't want the loops in your beads to show, or when you actually do want the loop because you want to connect this group of beads to another group of beads on another eye pin. As you can see here, as I will show you in a moment, the beads that are threaded onto the head pin don't have anything showing at the bottom. In fact, you can get pre-made decorative head pins that have a little design or a kind of little bead on them to make them a bit more interesting. So that's the difference between head pins and eye pins, and I will show you the same technique, to make either a head pin or an eye pin, depending on what size of loop that you make. So to get started with this, you will need your 20 gauge wire, and you should decide which order you want your beads to be placed in onto the wire. And the one that you want at the very top is going to be the first one that you string. So I want the little blue one to be on the top, followed by the big lilac bead. So after you are successful in threading your beads onto the wire, go ahead and grab your round nose pliers and be prepared to make a loop. Here I'm going to make a very small loop because I want my pin to be as head-like as possible. This little loop can be seen as a decorative accent and not merely as serving the function of keeping your beads on the wire. It actually looks pretty nice for most designs, and this is what I like to use instead of buying pre-made head pins. Next, to close off the top, bend the wire at slightly more than a 90-degree angle and snip off the wire, leaving about 1/4 of an inch of wire connected to the beads. Now we're going to make a connecting loop, so grab your round nose pliers and make a loop somewhere the size of the middle of your pliers, not too big, not too small, and start rolling from the end inwards. It's very important that you roll from the ends, otherwise your loop will not be even. Straighten out your loop if it doesn't look like it connected all the way. It takes practice to learn the correct distance of wire that you should leave in order to make a perfect loop, so don't stress out too much about it. You can now do the same thing to the other pair of beads, and we'll meet you back here in our earring tutorial next week in order to show you how to thread these two beads on the head pin onto your ear wires. To make your hook clasp, you will need 20 gauge wire, a chain or a piece of necklace or a bracelet, whatever you are attaching it to, some wire cutters, round nose pliers, your big flat pliers, and finally a ruler or a tape measure. Let's begin! To begin making your hook clasp, get your wire or whatever else that you're going to fit the hook clasp to, and thread your wire through it. First, we're going to begin to make a loop. Get your round nose pliers and make a loop about the size in the diameter that is halfway down your pliers. And then you're going to gently twist the round nose pliers and twist the wire around the pliers in order to make a loop. When it looks like the loop is almost closed, take your chain and thread it onto the loop so that you can finish closing the loop. Close the loop by inserting your round nose pliers back into the loop and holding it very firmly, using the other hand also for leverage, twist the wire around the wire that is still on the spool. It is good to hold the pliers in the loop so that your loop does not become deformed while you are doing this. When you cannot push the wire around anymore, get your wire cutters and snip the end off the wire. So now the wire on the spool should be attached securely to your chain. If the loop is a little deformed, feel free to smooth it out. Next, we are going to start making the hook portion of the hook clasp. Get your ruler so that you know how long you want to make your hook. I will try to make my hook about 1 inch long or 1.5 inches, allowing for some wrapping to occur. And then at that point, I will start gently folding the wire in half. You want this wire to be very, very close together. In order to help with keeping the wire very close without bending, use your finger to spread it apart and use pliers to gently pinch the end of the wire or the U-shaped part of the wire together. This wire is going to want to move, so make sure you have a very good grip on it. Don't pinch the wire too much, otherwise it will crisscross. We do not want to do that. We want to keep the two wires parallel to each other all the way through. Use your pliers to twist the wires in opposite directions if they have twisted too much to one side. Next, we will secure the end of the hook to just above the wire wrapping that you did for the loop that secures the chain to the wire. The principle of this is the same. Hold the two wires together in one hand while using the other hand to wrap the wire around the main stem of the wire. And you can also use the pliers to help you with this. And wrap the wire tightly around the stem of the main wire until your wrapping that you are doing now reaches the wrapping you've already done for the loop. Make sure that this wrapping is tight. When you are done wrapping, snip the end off with your wire cutters. If the wire stands up or is too jagged, use your flat pliers to smooth it down. Now you should have two wires that are firmly attached to the wire. And now it is time to bend them. Find a place that is a good place to bend it, just a little bit off center. and both wires together, bend them slowly and gently around your pliers to form a hook shape. You can control how long the hook part is by going further down the wire. Finally, use your pliers to raise the end of the hook just a tiny bit. This will help when you are threading your hook onto the ring of the clasp. And now the hook portion is finished. Now we are going to work on attaching the loop to the other side of our bracelet or necklace. Start the same way that you started the hook part by threading your wire or threading your chain onto your wire and making a loop using your round nose pliers. The loop part is exactly the same as we did before for the hook part. This loop part will secure your new length of wire to the other side of your bracelet or necklace. In the exact same way as before, we are going to wrap the end of the wire around the main stem of the wire, snipping the wire off when we are finished. Next, we are going to make the loop that will attach itself into the hook. Start by making a loop the largest size that your pliers will allow. And we are actually going to make a double loop here. So after you are done making one loop, go ahead and make another loop in the exact same fashion. Stop when your main wire is perpendicular to the main stem of the wire, and holding everything firmly, wrap the end of the wire around the main stem of the wire. Make sure everything is secure and go ahead and snip off the end. Now you have a hook and a clasp so that our makeshift necklace or bracelet can be attached. That's it.
Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. Leave us a comment with your question, a suggestion for a tutorial that you want to see next, or just to say hi. We craft every weekend on our YouTube channel right here and on our website. Like us on Facebook and subscribe to our channel to find out what we're making next. See you next week!